about once a year, I make a post on Facebook lamenting the lack of good horror films. And without fail, people comment and start listing off some of their favorite horror films. And some of them I've seen and I simply disagree with, and some of them I have not seen, then I go watch them, and I'm still left disappointed. So one of the things is I did not grow up watching horror films. It was something my mom didn't want me to, me and my brother to watch for whatever reason. And so I don't have the benefit of nostalgia for the genre. I came into the horror genre more actually after I got married, and mostly falling in love with at least the concept of horror started appealing to me because of a lot of research that I had been doing at that point into religion and even into the occult. No, I've never been a member of the occult or anything like that, just from pure curiosity, mythology, storytelling side of things. I guess the side effect of being married to a writer is that you get more interested in storytelling. And something that I decided for myself is that for something to actually be horror, it can't be cartoonish. It can't be over the top. More gore doesn't actually make it more horrifying. And after spending some time during my stint in college and post-college digging into not only mythology and storytelling, but also digging into psychology. And I only took 3 psychology classes. Well, 1 sociology class and 2 psychology classes. And then I've done a lot of psychology reading and lecture listening since then. And one of the things that makes horror actually horror is the psychology of it. Now, hey, look, some people are just incredibly sensitive and weak-stomached, and there's a range here, right? So what is horror for one person may not be for the next, and that is just something that we have to come to grips with. But when we deal with the idea of horror itself, we have to dig down to what actually makes people afraid, reel in disgust, spike their adrenaline, get their fight or flight response going, like those kind of things. And there are some movies that start digging into that and then do something to ruin it. The majority of movies don't do this well at all. They just substitute good psychological storytelling, regardless of the genre, right? Whether you are talking, slasher film or supernatural or body horror or whatever, all of those are fine, and different aspects of the genre will appeal to different people differently. But most movies, instead of going the storytelling route, just go the route of let's just throw more. And the problem is that more is not always better. Now, we can look at a lot of these, and a lot of these came along in days of poor practical effects and low budgets and bad scripts. I mean, the ones that everybody loves, Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th and Hellraiser. There are, of course, aspects to them that are good, but by and large, on the whole, every single one of those movies is just a cartoonish, awful example of horror. It doesn't actually do anything. And again, if it was made for children, then it would probably suit, because children don't have experience or understanding. They experience the world more vividly. They're more sensitive to the visceral emotions and all of that. They can't logic themselves out of being afraid as well. So those kind of things work on kids. And so when people go back and view that through a lens of nostalgia, they go, oh, this was great and this made me feel this way. And that's fine. Look, I've got nostalgia about things too. But that doesn't change the fact, right? Nostalgia doesn't change the fact that if you actually sit down and do like a literary analysis of what's going on and break down the story and break down the scenes and the tension and the resolution and things like that, most of these movies couldn't fight their way out of a wet paper bag in that regard, and that's pretty pathetic. And again, we can blame low budgets and bad effects and just bad directorial decisions and things like that. But at the end of the day, it still comes down to the script wasn't good in the first place. And that's a problem. Now, since those early days, some people have tried to make more horrifying horror. And to some degree, they've succeeded in parts, but I still have yet to see one in whole. And a lot of it comes down to when they start peaking to crescendo, when they do the big reveal, things like that. They tend to turn it up to 11 without any regard for the pacing or the feel or the fit, and it tends to go from like photorealism to cartoon, 0 to 60 in nothing flat, and it's too much of a rapid change that it feels disjointed. It doesn't feel like it actually belongs in it, and it actually just pulls you out of the narrative completely. Now, I've said this before, and I'll probably end up saying it again, but I don't get pulled into narratives generally anyway. I have a lot of trouble with that. I just do not, I don't suspend disbelief. I don't get sucked into a story. I don't empathize. In fact, I believe empathy is a mental illness. So, take that for whatever it is. But the point is that I understand that I am not the normal audience and I am not the intended audience. And I get that. But it is also frustrating because it makes it very, very difficult for me to enjoy any entertainment, because every time something happens that messes with the beats of the storytelling, it just flips the switch right off, pulls you right back out. You go into editor mode, you go into producer mode, and you go, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. And it is terrible. You just can't get past the mistakes. And I know that's not necessarily the best way to watch a film or a TV show or read a book, but it is what it is. It's not a part of my brain that I can change. And so kind of, let's use an example, right? And this is something that, this is actually what set off this rant, is I was given the recommendation of the movie Hereditary. And people were like, oh, it's really good. And I read, just little things, nothing spoiler-wise about the plot. I had no idea what the plot was going to be going in, because I figured that gives me a better chance. And, one of the actors talked about how much the role damaged him as an actor, psychologically and everything, acting that role. And I was like, okay, this is promising. And so I get the movie, I put it on, and the movie starts off kind of at a snail's pace. I think that it could have built momentum a little bit faster without ruining it at all. The slow pace wasn't terrible, and I don't I'm not one of these people that needs everything to be at a sprint, from the get-go. That's sometimes a movie feels too short if it's too fast-paced. But at the same time, even if it's going to move slow, it needs momentum, right? It needs some weight behind it. And I felt like they were missing some of that momentum going slow, right? It didn't feel heavy enough from the beginning. It felt rather bland from the beginning. And then they did a couple of, supernatural hat tips, poltergeisty kind of things and whatnot, but they really didn't focus on that. And so for like the entire first act, it was more kind of just like a psychological drama showing, cracking at the seams, so to speak, from some of the characters and all that. And the acting was really good. The script was good. Gabriel Byrne's character could have been completely removed from the entire movie, and the movie would not have changed, which is a shame because Gabriel Byrne is a fine actor, and he could have contributed to the story. But they did so much with the mother. I cannot remember the actress's name offhand, but they did so much with her, kind of in her own thing and with her children and all of that, that her interactions with her husband and the children's interaction with their father were so inconsequential to the story that the couple of lines that were useful of his could have been given to the son, or somebody else in passing, and you could cut him out completely, and he was not important to the story at all, which is again really a shame. And then the movie starts off kind of crawl to walk, right? And they did finally build up some momentum, and it was going pretty well. And then when they kind of get into the second act and start doing some reveals and you start seeing some more poltergeisty shit going on, what ends up happening is they kind of just break into a trot, right? There's no gradual speed up into it. It was just kind of like they did a flip of tone, and they're just like, all right, we're doing a poltergeist movie now. And it was acceptable, but it could have been handled better. And that it was disappointing, but it was what it was. And then you get into the final act of the movie, and they just go in like, full on occult possession, demonology kind of stuff. And that they went from the trot to a sprint like immediately. That was a hard turn. And that was one of those moments that it broke the pacing of the narrative in such a way that it was not acceptable the way it was between the first two acts. And it like they went into proper horror movie territory, which was really, really cool. And there were some things that were handled really well, some others that were not handled so well. The bigger problem there, though, was just the fact that like they just turned it up to 11, for like the last 40 minutes, and it was too fast, too quickly. And it broke the illusion. You stop caring about the characters, you stop caring about the scenario they're in. It just, again, you go into editor mode, and it just pulls you just completely out of the movie. Now, before I go on, there will be a spoiler. I mean, the movie's a couple years old, but I mean, there's going to be a spoiler here. They should have ended the movie when the son is being chased down by his possessed mother, and she beheads herself, and he jumps out a window. They should have totally just cut there, right? You hear the body clunk on the floor. You see the possession pass to him. He should have woken up in the flower bed right there. Look into the camera, give a knowing smirk, fade to black. That should have been the end of the movie. But they didn't do that. No, they had to do the worst, cheesiest 90s style headless body floating across the yard to the treehouse, where the possessed son, who apparently being possessed, he still is acting like he's completely bewildered and has no idea what's going on. Like, they're inconsistent with how this possession thing works. And he goes up into the treehouse, and he's got this horror court of headless bodies and naked freaky people, and they crown him as one of the princes of hell. And they do this, they end on exposition. They literally end with somebody giving an incantation, totally exposition style, crowning him as a prince of hell, and he still looks bewildered and confused as like, I don't know what's going on here. You're a demon possessing a human being, and you knew what you were doing. You even changed hosts to the host that you want by manipulating people. Come on, like, it was the most ham-fisted ending that completely ruined the entire movie. They took a 5-minute scene, not even 5 minutes, right? They took a very short scene at the very end, and they obliterated all of the weight of the movie up to that point. Missteps that I could have forgiven had they ended on a good note, but no, they ruined the entire movie by just going absolute, breaking the volume knob off, super cheesy, caricature, cartoony, and end on a line of exposition. It was awful. Awful. And so I went in with very high expectations. Hey, shame on me, but I went in with very high expectations. I was fairly satisfied through about half of the movie. I was, reasonably satisfied through most of the second half of the movie. And then there were some things at the end that were just incoherent, inconsistent, and just plain bad storytelling. It was aggravating. Because this is, again, one of those movies that was just, like it's an adult movie for adult people and there's no nostalgia to it. It's a new movie and you're sitting here going like, you do so many things to make me not give a shit about any of these characters or the scenarios they're in. What am I supposed to do with that? Like, I can't appreciate that anymore. And the thing is that this is not the only movie that has screwed the pooch in the ending. So many movies screw the pooch at the end. I know I'm going to be the odd man out here, but the Evil Dead reboot that they did, 7-8 years ago, something like that. It was a really, really fantastic movie. It was an excellent reboot all the way up until the end. The big payoff at the end was the most cartoonish, over-the-top bullshit that just completely wrecked the movie. Because remember, the first Evil Dead was not written as a horror comedy, and horror does not benefit from being hybridized with comedy. I had an argument with a dipshit about this. Hybridizing a movie is not the same thing as having comedic lines. Yes, of course, you need comic relief, you need moments of happiness and joy, you need the juxtaposition, of course, right? Having a moment of comedy, having a one-liner, whatever, having somebody, break the tension, that's fine. Having a movie that is just jab after jab after jab of comedy is, well, it basically completely removes the horror aspect from it completely. I think horror comedy is a waste of time as horror. Sometimes, if they really lean into the comedy, then it can be really fun comedy. If they don't lean into the comedy, then it's just bad horror. But the original Evil Dead was written as an honest horror movie. It was not written as a horror comedy, the way that Army of Darkness was. And so trying to reboot Evil Dead, they were trying to do an honest horror movie. They were not trying to do, they were trying to keep to the original intent of doing a proper horror movie, not a horror comedy. But by going just absolute over the top, especially the Reign of Blood ending, it wrecked the entire experience of the movie on that one scene at the end. Just screwed the pooch at the end. I Am Legend with Will Smith. Not really a horror movie, but kind of a horror action kind of thing. Again, the first half of the movie, showing him alone, kind of, again, cracking at the seams. I like the psychological stuff, right? Showing him walking around with his dog, some strange things going on. If they had kept that feel throughout the entire movie, that would have been a really fantastic movie. I've never read the book that it was based on, so I don't know how well it compares anyway. And I don't have any problems with Will Smith. I think Will Smith is a fine actor. Even outside of comedy and all that, I think he does a good job, so I don't think he ruined it at all. But the first half of the movie had a feel, had a tone, had a pacing they could have finished the movie after the first half, and it would have been a nearly perfect psychological, horror movie, suspense movie kind of thing. And it would have been really good. But again, they did a hard flip at the end, and they just turned it into, a creature feature action movie. And it completely wrecked the horror aspect. It wrecked the psychological drama aspect of it. That flip ruined the movie. And there's numerous other examples where the monster reveal, the change of pace when there's the actual engagement with the murderer, the slasher, or whatever. In so many of these movies, they just miss the mark by doing these hard changes in pace, tone, or even a single scene or a single line that just completely ejects you from the story, from the narrative, and it makes you not care about anything in the story anymore. That is bad storytelling, and unfortunately, Hollywood is full of that. And it's not just horror, of course, right? Hollywood does this to everything. I was having a conversation about the new He-Man with my Kung Fu brother, and we both kind of just agreed at the end of the conversation that corporate media needs to die. It sucks because on the one side, right, they have the big budgets, and the big budgets means the better production, and the better production means potentially, bringing a story to life in a better way. Unfortunately, it almost never works out that way. And so you get all of this meddling into the actual story by the studios and the producers, and clashes with directors and scriptwriters and whatnot, trying to make a movie marketable. And they're always trying to make it lowest common denominator marketable, because at the end of the day, it comes down to dollars coming back in for the production. And I get that. Artists absolutely should be paid. But here's the thing, right? This is something I learned when I was studying marketing. It's like, if something is for everybody, then it's not for anybody. By marketing to the lowest common denominator, you are making sure that everybody is getting kind of a mediocre, barely passable piece of what they want, but nobody's getting the full experience of what they want because nothing is being tailored. And that's kind of a problem. And because Hollywood is the way it is, and it has been for a long time, this is not a purely current phenomenon, but because Hollywood's the way it is, they're trying to get the 7 to 10 figure returns, and I get that. But at some point, you start alienating audiences because they're just not getting what they want. And then the problem is, you spend a lot of time teasing them up, saying, well, you liked this one thing, but you wanted it to be a little better, so here's the thing that you really wanted, and then you watch it and you go, well, it's still not the thing I wanted. You still dumbed it down to the lower common denominator, and that's problematic. And then, of course, a lot of people are starting to look to independent filmmaking, which is awesome. Independent filmmaking just doesn't get the marketing or the distribution. People end up not knowing about it. Doesn't always get on the platforms where we actually, rent or purchase movies. People don't generally like going out of their way to find stuff. And we live in an age of convenience, and I'm not saying it's a good thing, but we live in an age of convenience where if it's not on the major distribution platforms, people are probably going to skip it unless it gets just absolutely stellar reviews from people they trust, and then they'll go out of their way to go find it. So as the entertainment community, right, as the consumer community, we need to find ways to promote the people that are doing the work that we love. We need to find a way to promote the work that is, honoring the spirit of the storytelling that we want, that is honoring the production that we want. We have to be better as consumers, because at the end of the day, if we keep paying the big companies to do big company things, and then we keep complaining that the big companies do big company things, but we keep giving them money, there's no incentive for them to change their practices. We have to do something different as consumers. And I don't necessarily have the best solution for what to do about that. But as much as you might want to consume the big budget stuff, and I'm not telling you not to, the thing is that if you want things to change, you have to seek out the stuff that is honoring what you want more. And, share it around. Use social media to your advantage. Review the movies and books and comics from independent creators. Spread the word around. Get people to watch it. Find ways to make distribution easier for the independent creators. I mean, this is what the internet could be so well used for, is for giving the independent creator a voice, as opposed to only giving the corporate media a voice. And we've seen this over and over and over again. Self-publishing platforms keep getting corporate interference that starts taking the money away from the independent creators. Independent creators are making too much money. Oh, so here comes the big corporation that decides to come in and make money like the independent creators are making, and then they end up taking it over. We saw that with Amazon for sure. So we have to be better. We have to be better as a buying public. And, demanding stuff from the studios clearly doesn't work. So we have to do something else, right? And, again, maybe that is just starve them of their money and give our money that we want to spend to those that are actually doing the good work. Because if we don't do that, again, what's going to change? You cannot keep doing the same thing and expect different results. So I have definitely rambled on long enough. This is definitely a long one. So I will talk to you guys later. Good journey.
Chocolate-covered laser discs, flashing like a dagger in the night.